I got some questions for you to sort of do some mind exercises and limber up our ability to think clearly. You ready? First question, here it is. Speak right up when you know the answer. If a chicken tells you all chickens are liars, is that chicken telling you the truth? Think about it now. There's some context involved in this. And the reason I bring these questions up, I got 3 of them for you today, is because when we read what we're about to read here in Romans, there's context, there's structure, there's some interesting words within the sentences that we talk about that makes all the difference to the answer and the conclusions we come up with. If a chicken tells you all chickens are liars, is he telling you the truth? What's the answer? The answer is chickens can't talk. Chickens can't talk. Here's a better one, and this one will exercise your mind a little bit better. All right, you're there, minding your own business, and you see a ship full of people. And you look away just for a moment, and you look back. The ship hasn't sunk, it hasn't gone away, but there's not a single person on that ship. What's the answer? Why? Why? Now, the answer lies in what we just said. The context. The words. The answer's there. You want to know what it is? They're all married. They're not single. There's not a single person on that deck. They're all married. And that's the point of reading the Bible. A word, and the way that word is used, means everything to understanding what the Bible tells us. Now, here's the hardest one of all. And I'm telling you now, before I tell you this whole thing, when I ask you the question, everything we covered leading up to the answer is there. We just have to think about it critically and in the proper context. The context is there. There's a fellow, he's traveling to a village. He needs to get there. He's on a bit of a time crunch. And he gets there, and one of my pictures would have been a fork in the road. I was thinking about putting a fork in a road, but that's a joke. I'd get past that. This fellow, he needs to get to his town. He's on a bit of a time crunch. And he comes to a fork in the road, and he knows his village is down one of those 2 roads, but he's not sure which one he goes to. He doesn't have time to go down there and come back. But there's a guy there. He's from the village, apparently. And he says, I can tell you which way to go. You can only ask me 3 questions and no more. I'm from one of those villages. One of the villages down one of these roads is the village of liars, where everyone lies. And one of the villages is the village of truth, where everyone tells the truth. Well, that's the one he needs to go to. He needs to go to the village of truth. But he doesn't know what to do. So you can only ask 3 questions. Fine. Fine. Are you from the village of truth? Yes, he says. Well, that's no good. If he's from the village of truth, then obviously he's going to say, I'm from the village of truth. If he's from the liar's village, then obviously he's going to lie and say he's from the, what to do. So he asks the next question. He says, are you telling the truth? Yes, he says. Well, same problem. Truth person's going to say the truth. Liar's going to say he's telling the truth. So the fellow asks his last question and then confidently goes to the village of truth. Question is, what was his last question? Because he's in the village of truth now. He made it. What was his last question? And the answer lies in the context of what we just said. The answer is there. We're gonna go into Romans. Miss Susan read it all. It is understood, universally agreed, in fact, that it's one of the most difficult passages in the Bible, let alone Romans. There's a lot of back and forth, give and take. But context and the words that's used is important for us to understand exactly what Paul is saying. What was the last question the fellow asked to get to the village of truth? Does anybody want to guess? Or do you want me to tell you the answer? Because I'm not hearing what. Here's the answer. Michaela, do you know the answer?
No.
Here's the answer. He said, okay, of the 2 roads, which one leads to your village? If he's from the village of truth, he's going to tell him. If he's from the village of liars, he's going to tell them the village of truth. Context is everything, and the truth comes out. So he confidently strides down the road to the village of truth. Romans 5, 12 through 21 was read a little earlier. And we're going to try to break this down in a way where we can't misunderstand this one little bit. And we're going to do this as Einstein said. And Einstein had a quote. He said, we're going to make things as simple as possible, but not simpler. Which in itself sounds pretty cryptic. But what he means is this. We're going to break it down to try to make it as understandable as we can, but we're not going to dumb it down, because that would be doing a disservice to what the message of the verses are. All right? This is kind of a three-section verse that we're looking at. The first one is the ruin of mankind. The second one is the rescue of mankind. The third one is the reign of mankind. Or you can change mankind to humankind if you like. So it's going to start right out with verse number 12. My glasses. Verse number 12. Verse number 12 says this. In 12 words, it says the ruin of mankind. Not the condition of mankind, the ruin of mankind. And it's this. It says, therefore, just as sin entered into the world through one man, and death through sin, and this way death came to all men, because all sinned. All right? He's talking about what happened in Genesis 2. Genesis 2, that's where God's walking along with Adam. Adam has not yet sinned or had done anything wrong, so there's contact. You can have that with God. And he says, he's giving them the little, you ever get in an apartment where the apartment person's showing you the apartment, here's the bedroom, here's the bathroom, here's all the things you can use and don't use, and so on. Here's the pool. Don't let kids in there. Well, God's doing that. Walk through the Garden of Eden. Here's this, here's that. Here's what you're responsible of. Eat what you like. Have a good time. Oh, see that tree over there? Almost forgot. That tree over there? What, that tree? Yeah, that tree. The one that looks really delicious? That's the tree. Don't eat anything on that tree, God says. Right? And here's a quote. Or you'll surely die. Now, that alone, I think, would convince me that I'm not going to eat from the tree. Because I don't want to die. I don't want to die. That didn't work for Adam. Surely die did not work for him at all. He will surely die. But the word, and like I said, the context and the words is what we need to look at, because Paul is talking about something particular. And he's setting a foundation of understanding that follows on. And it's the word sin, right at the end. It says, right at the end, it says, therefore, just as one man's sin entered the world, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men, because all sinned. S-I-N-N-E-D. Right? It wasn't an action that we do. It was something that has been completed. And it says, all people sin. So wait a minute, Pastor. I just came onto the scene. I just got here. Yeah, welcome. Welcome to a completed action that you're a part of now. If you were born back in the older ages, you're born into a caste system. Some people were born wealthy. Some people were born as slaves. Some people were born in the middle class. Whatever that is, that's where you were born into. You accepted it and you lived in that particular lifestyle. It's no different today. You were born to the world. All right? And we were once, when we were with Adam, in the Garden of Eden. That was life. But that got kind of messed up, and they were kicked out into the valley of the shadow of death. Death. That's a big word. And it says that right there. Death through sin. And I will say from the Psalms, the valley of the shadow of death, another 20 times today. So we get the clue and understanding exactly where we live. The world is beautiful, but it's nothing like it once was. Because now we live here. It might be unfair, but this is where you're at. And the faster you come to this understanding, the easier it is for us to start climbing out of it like a ladder. Adam, the name Adam, what's it mean? Somebody knows it. He's not here. Somebody, it means mankind. I was intrigued by this. So I'm not sure, because Gladys asks these questions all the time. And every now and then I come up with my own. So did God say, hey, welcome to the world, your name is Adam? No. No, actually he didn't say that. He just started calling him Adam in the book. Just started naming, because he made mankind, it says. Humankind. People. We need to just go ahead and let's make it a word. Let's just say Adam. And Adam means people. Everybody. So when we say Adam completed the act of sin, saying that covers everybody. It's mankind. Adam, solidarity with Adam. We stand in solidarity with that condemnation. You're born into a world of condemnation. That's unfair. We used to say that all the time. The world's not full of cupcakes and rainbows there, Sonny. I got that from the movie the other day. I told Wendy I was going to start using it, cupcakes and rainbows. It's from the movie Trolls. Anyways, Adam is mankind. All right? This is the Pauline doctrine. It's vital to understand that we all stand in condemnation due to, as we understand it, original sin. Right? So you all have an Adam solidarity. We're all in the same boat, if I can go ahead and make a little pun reference to my little riddle from before. And it's universal. It doesn't matter where you're from, or what country you're at, or which denomination you hold, or whether you're believing this God or that God, we're in the same boat. Every single one of us. We're all in the same world. Our ruin is universal. And I'm just in the first verse. Now, logically, having explained the work of the first Adam in verse 12, and so on, it seems to me he should go ahead and start talking about God or Jesus a little bit, because obviously that's the second Adam. But that's not what Paul does, because he wants to confuse us. He doesn't want to confuse us. He just wants to make us think and understand this properly. So he doesn't do that. He goes on to verses 13 and 14. And it says this. It says, before the law was given, sin was in the world. But sin was not taken into account when there was no law. Nonetheless, death reigned from the time of Adam to the time of Moses, even over those who did not sin by breaking the command, as in Adam, who was a pattern of the one to come. Now, on the surface, that sounds understandable, right? It sounds it. But it's got something hidden within there. It's not even hidden. It's clear. We have to look at it stage by stage, right? He says, after all these chapters telling us how sin is condemnation, and we're all a part of that, and he says that in one line there, it says, but sin is not taken into account when there is no law. Well, what gives? You know what he's not saying? He's not saying that sin is not reckoned, right? He's not saying that at all. Paul means in comparison with what happens when the law is present. There's a difference, I guess, in how we see sin, depending on the law or not the law. For example, and I'm going to have two illustrations here for you that looks beautiful on video up there, but I'll do my best to explain it. I had a wonderful picture of Texas barbecue up there. Texas barbecue. It's got to be what they serve 24/7 in heaven, I'm pretty sure. But I didn't know how awesome Texas barbecue was until I got to Texas and I tried it the first time. And even then, I didn't try it right away. It took the motorcycle ministry to ride to a barbecue. And as chance would have it, I rode to one of the best barbecues nationwide. It's right there in Texas. All of them are in Texas. But that could be maybe it's just being, what's that called when you're showing favoritism? That's it. I'm showing favoritism. That could be me just being showing favoritism. Until then, Texas barbecue didn't register in my thinking. It wasn't a part of my conviction. I didn't reckon that. Food and Texas barbecue weren't in the same hemisphere. But it was always there, wasn't it? It was always there. To be a little bit more specific and to get us to the right understanding, there's a guy who has a paper route. He hates his paper route. He doesn't want to go on a paper route. He's probably there because his parents told him, if you want money, you're going to have to get a job. You know, but I'm 12. Yeah, you can get jobs at 12. Paper boy. Look it up. So he gets a paper route. And he doesn't like doing it. So he rides his bike to get it done as fast as possible, just throwing the papers at the houses. And as the motivation increases to be done as soon as he can, there's several houses that are on the corner of streets, and he rides right through the lawn and goes down the other way. No reason why not to. Until one day, there's one lawn, he's ridden through it so much there's a little path starting to appear. And a sign pops up. Sign says, "Stay off the grass, no bikes." That's what it says. And it's not pointing out, it's pointing in the direction in which he rides. Obviously, it's for him. He rides and sees a sign as he rides past it, right up to the feet of the guy that authored the sign. And that guy proceeds to share a matter of the heart about what that sign means. what he says. Anything like that, right? Oh, where am I? There it is. So, was he allowed to go through the grass? No. No, but now the sign's there, the transgression is clearly and crystally defined. However, was it any less a permissible event even if the sign wasn't there? No. No, he wasn't supposed to go to the grass. Whether there was a law or not, the fact that he was committing a wrong was still there. So therefore, to claim ignorance doesn't change the fact that sin was still present. Now let's read this again. It says, "For before the law was given," before the law was even there, sin was in the world. But sin was not taken into account when there's no law. People just sort of randomly acting as they wanted to, pretending there's no such thing as right and wrong anyways. Nevertheless, death reigned, regardless of whether law was there or not. Regardless of whether someone told you this is right, it doesn't matter. Death and condemnation still existed. From the time of Adam all the way to Moses, even those that did not sin by breaking a command, as did Adam. You can't claim ignorance. Because we live in the valley of shadow of death and in condemnation from the word go. Paul's overall point is that all human race remained under death and sin, whether there was a law to tell them that or not. And it's universal. It's unfair, Pastor. I don't think it's fair. I don't stand in solidarity with that. Well, buck up, buttercup, because that's really a realistic, that's really an understanding we need to come to grips with. But understand this, all right? Solidarity with one person meant we are under that kind of condemnation. But, right? Not only that solidarity condemns us through that one man, but it also makes it possible, right? And here's where things take an uptick. Salvation, then, is also through one person. All right? And this brings us to the matter of our rescue. Our rescue comes through a much greater work of one man. Now, this actually starts off with the last end of verse 14. And if it's on the board, I actually used the NIV, or not the NIV, the New Living Translation, which I don't have written down, which is too bad. But I'm going to read what I have written down here, because I can sort of get it up here anyways. The last phrase of verse 14 tells us that Adam was a pattern or type of the one that was to come. If you read the New Living, it just takes liberties and just puts names in there. It says Adam is a representation of the one to come, whose name is Christ. It says there. Look at that. I did memorize it. It has the names in there. There's no word Christ in the Old Testament, but it takes liberties, puts it in there, so we don't have to really think too hard. And I like that. However, that verse sometimes misleads people that you can go ahead and do the sacrilegious thing of comparing the first Adam and second Adam together. There is no comparison. Right? We don't compare ourselves with Christ. Maybe two, because he is holy, therefore we should be holy, and that is the benchmark, right? But not with. Which is what they do with this all the time, right? There's no parallel. There is the unforgivable sin, right? And then there's grace, not a comparison, right? And Paul takes verse 15, 16, and 17, and some of 18, 19. He's going to say the same thing about 5 times. Because like Dora the Explorer, you got to say it about 5 to 7, 8, 10 times. Anybody remember the show? How many times did she say the same thing? Oh, I had to let kids watch something. Apparently that was one of the ones I let them watch. But no Barney. That was not happening in our house. The gift, it says right off the bat in verse 15, but the gift is not like the trespass. The first words, life, right, is not like death. And I'd imagine no one here was going to argue with me against that. Do you want to die? No. No one wants to die. Right? And besides, death is a state that we live in every single day of our lives. Because, let me backtrack a little bit, we live in the valley of shadow of death. Why is that? And we say that word in Psalms because of the location we live in. When we were in the Garden of Eden, we walked and talked and lived with God. Death is a separation from God. Hence, the valley of shadow of death in which we live in. What we want to do our entire life is to try to bridge that gap and have life again, which happens through Jesus. Life is not like death. For if the many died by the trespasses of one man, how much more did God's grace, and that's important for us, that's going to come back on us again, how much more did God's grace and the gift that came by the grace of the one man overflow to the many? And that's what I want you all, overflows to the many. That we need to remember that. That's going to come back on us a little later on. The sin of Adam brought death. The works of Jesus brought life abundant. It doesn't compare. And verse 16, and it says this, I swear, it says, and again, the gift of God is not like the results of one sin. No comparison. Though we like to go ahead and make that mistake, and I'm sure the Jews did all the time, living the life of privileged nature. The judgment followed one sin and brought condemnation, but the gift followed many trespasses and brought justification. Adam's one transgression brought death. Jesus' death brought forgiveness for thousands and untold multitudes of transgressions. Because the action of Adam was one action, one death, paid for by everybody, under condemnation. However, that selfishness, that original sin that exists in each and every one of us, causes us to do more sins, and we just compound it and compound it. And we're always in trouble sometime, somewhere. Which is why the death of Jesus on the cross is so abundantly more, because he is forgiving so much more than just the one sin. But all our transgressions. And each and every one of them has built up quite a little list. Verse 17. For if by the trespass of one man, there it is again, the death reigned through the one man, how much more? We're starting to see the a pattern. of what one man did, but how much more one man can do, because it keeps saying, how much more will those who receive, we've changed the words here, those who receive, how much more? Those who receive God's abundant provision of grace and the gift of righteousness reign in the life through one man, Jesus Christ. How much more? What did Adam do? Adam sinned. How did he sin? He ate the fruit. Wrong. He was disrespectful and didn't follow that rule. That's not the sin. The sin is he wanted to be like God. There's a little snake. He's got legs at this point, because you recall he had slither, so he had to have legs. I don't know why we don't have pictures of that. I found one once. I use it all the time for children's ministry down south. Little snake with legs. Maybe like a salamander, just longer. Anyways, here he comes. He says, hey, did he really say you'll die? So the first thing he had to do was take away the threat of the punishment. Isn't that exactly where we live in today? All day long, if I'm in any kind of theological conversation with a regular person, the conversation of hell and condemnation, that gets watered down. That's the first thing we need to do if we're going to go ahead and live selfishly. We need to take away the punishment that exists if we are anything but dedicated to God. So that's what he hasn't changed his act yet. He did where Adam. Well, it's Eve at this particular time. Did you really say you'll die? You're not going to die. You're not going to do it. In fact, he's afraid that you'll be like him. If you eat that fruit, you'll be like God. Really? I want to be like God. And every time we do a selfish decision, it's selfish into raising ourselves up and making our own decisions like God. I'm the master of me. I can make I know what's best for me. I will be true to myself like God. God's got no control over me. I got control over me. See how this sort of plays in? Jesus, on the other hand, it says, and I don't have the exact verse here. It says, Jesus, for by the trespasses of the one man, death reigned through that one man. Oh, you know what? I'm wrong. Sorry about that. Woo! This is, man. There's Philippians. Jesus did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of the servant, the very nature of the service, because he was there to serve, not to be served. Right? The servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself, and became obedient to death, and even death on a cross. And we all know there is not a more humiliating death in the world at that time than death on a cross. And that's what Jesus did. Adam wanted to be like God. Jesus didn't do any of that. He instead humbled himself all the way down to death. And because of that, God raised him up. Every knee will bow one day. Every tongue will confess. This is Philippians 2, 6 through 11, by the way. So on one hand, we have the solidarity with Adam. We live in condemnation. But on the other hand, we have salvation. If we become in solidarity with Christ. You see how we worked in the whole born again? I'm not of this body. I'm now of this body. And this vine, producing good fruits. Instead of continually living in solidarity of condemnation, producing all of these other fruits. We're going to get to that right now. Called the reign of mankind. How we live in the love of Christ. This is the apex of Paul's expression of what he's talking about. Comes to this point. And you would think he's going to move on, but he doesn't. He almost says the same exact thing. He says in verse 20, the law was added so that trespasses might increase. What? What does he mean by that? Well, this plays on what we saw earlier. I mean, we don't know what sins we do. But as soon as we open our eyes, we abide in Christ, and He in us, we see the sins and they start to multiply. So, oh man. Where sins increase, grace increases all the more. That's our money statement right here. Where sins increase, grace increases all the more. I had the word for increase all the more in its Hebrew form on there. It's really complex. The deal is this. You can't really, it's hard to translate that word to English. And all they come up with is increase all the more. And there's sin, and grace increases all the more. It doesn't really give you a visualization. So let me help you with that. When sin increases, it's pathetic, it's lying and cheating and stealing and things like that. Grace abounds evermore, incomprehensibly next to it, I suppose. Gigantic is the word I like. Giant, huge, and gigantic, all in one word. To understand that there is no comparison. He went through a ton of time telling you there's no comparison between condemnation and grace of life. And that's what we're talking about here. It's a continuation. We all understand this? Before, this is how we understand it now. Sin is here. How much more is the grace of God? Well, it's incomprehensible. More than the sin. Sin increased, grace increases all the more. So, Mel Trotter, I want to say an illustrative story here for us to understand exactly what this means. Sin increases, but grace all the more. Mel Trotter, he's a guy who you may or may not know. He's relatively well known at this point. He was pretty much down on his luck at one point. Badly. He was an alcoholic, a thief. His life was in shambles. And it reached a conclusion of sorts one day when his little girl died. He was already an alcoholic. Now, what's left? His little girl died. And if he's an alcoholic already, who's to blame for all that? He's going to blame himself. This is bad. And then one day, he stumbles into Pacific Garden Mission. He stumbles in there because he's an alcoholic. And that day, do you know how he got his alcohol? Written in the book, not lying, not making this up. That he was at his daughter's funeral and stole the shoes off his daughter's feet in the casket to go and buy the alcohol that he was drinking, that he stumbled into that mission with. That is sin compounded. You see how it's coming up? But it's nothing great about that sin. It's all pretty low. It's nothing to be astounded by other than, I can't believe you can do that. But he met God that night. The Holy Spirit entered into him that night. He was a broken and a humble individual that night. And he met God. 8 years later, from that night, so wondrous was the effect of God's abounding grace in his life that he was ordained a Presbyterian ministry with he was an outstanding evangelist as well. And you may remember that I said, where's my thing here? It says, where sin increased, grace increases all the more. All right? He was increasing his sin. Became a pastor, right? And then founded more than 67 rescue missions coast to coast. That is grace abounding more. I'm a drunkard. I'm a liar. I'm a thief. I stole the shoes off my little girl in the casket to buy alcohol. 67 rescue missions when you're a part of the life of Christ. That is the definition of when sin increases, grace increases more. Incomprehensible comparison. Doesn't come close. Not sure why it's in the same sentence other than to make a point. Where sin is increased, grace increases all the more. And remember I said it abounds and flows out through people? That's because it flows out through him. And the grace is never, and the salvation of us, and the escape from the valley of the shadow of death is not for our own salvation, but for the salvation of everybody we come in contact with. 67 rescue missions. That's coming in contact to a couple of few people right there. Verse 21 wraps this up. So that just as sin reigned in death, so also grace might reign through righteousness. And that's the way he lived, in righteousness. To bring eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. To bring it in 67 rescue missions. The latter. The first one is the ruin of man. You know the Beatitudes? It's a rather famous set of sermons that Jesus talked about. What's the very first Beatitude? Right, Matthew 3. It says this: Blessed are the poor in spirit. That's the first one. Blessed are the poor in spirit, the humble, the broken, the down, where we bring ourselves to Christ in this particular way. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That is the foundation from which we start from. It's where we begin. Where we see where we are at in our lives. It's no different than anybody else. I've sinned this much. Yeah? You're still in the same place I am. Had this picture that showed a thief, a murderer, and then it showed a deacon and a pastor. Same place. That's why humility is the name of the game. We all start in the same rung of the ladder. Salvation. To know the reign of the vine. I had notes on the board. That produces good fruit. To be in solidarity with Jesus. No longer in solidarity with Adam, but rather solidarity with Jesus. Being born again. To do something else. And knowing God loves us. And allowing His affection to permeate every corner of our lives. And you too. And you too can live a righteous life that may touch so many people. Like 67 rescue missions. I said that enough. I just want that to be understood. And what is possible through the vine of Jesus. And where are we at today? We take stock of our lives right now. Where are we at right now? Have we even considered climbing that line, that rope, or that ladder? Do we realize the condition of the ruin of man? Do we know that it's a done deal? And now it's up to us to make a difference? If so, then we come to Him broken. And we haven't come to Him broken yet. It's time to come to Him broken. And get started. Let's go to the Lord in prayer.